it's, I said it would be every couple of weeks. I'm going to do part two of the baseball thing. We left off, remember, at 1905, you know, which by this time, baseball's franchises have been set in concrete, basically. It's not going to change until the early 50s. Yeah, I'm just going to right into it. I'm not going to have any prelim here. With this baseball history thing. So, like in 1905, as we said, did I get 1905 out of the way? I don't believe I did. No, because I didn't cover the hitless wonders. The 1905 White Sox, who, the one time in their history they ever played the Cubs in the World Series. And the Cubs were the dominant team of the era. Well, the Giants were great too, and the Athletics and stuff, but the Cubs, man, they were just dominant. And they won 100 and some games and were just the most National League pennant winners, and they just dominated that league. But then you got this White Sox team winning the American League, and basically without hitting. And this is in an era this is the dead ball era now. I forgot to mention that part of it. We're in the dead ball era here. And believe me, the first decade of the 20th century was dead. Probably the deadest of dead ball eras in the history of baseball, and I'm including 1968 in that. At least in 1968, guys did hit home runs. And home runs were almost unheard. Well, they weren't unheard of, especially inside the park home runs. But no, over the fence home runs were very rare. They happened, but they were rare. Very rarer than like a triple would be now. It was pretty rare. Like the league leader in home runs at 6. Well, they couldn't even do that. The White Sox. They had really, really good pitching, but they had no hitting whatsoever. But they made it to the World Series because of their pitching, and probably defense and stuff. Some speed maybe here and there. And they're just these heavy underdogs. They're crosstown rivals. And they won the series. And so, yeah. That's 1905. I mean, going to 1906. Yeah. I mean, through the first decades when the Cubs are always in the World Series, the Giants might be. The Pirates had a nice run in the late 1900s with the Honus Wagner teams, who was a great player. I mean, they played the Tigers a couple of times with Ty Cobb. Oh, Ty Cobb. Okay, Ty Cobb. Okay. A lot of things written and said about Ty Cobb in history. A lot of them involve how big of an asshole, racist fuck he was, supposedly. But this guy wrote a book called Ty Cobb, A Terrible Beauty, recently. And a lot of it's gotten debunked. He was apparently, maybe when he was younger he was somewhat racist, coming from the South. But later in life especially. I mean, he actually praised Jackie Robinson in 1947. So this guy can play in any league, he may as well play in this one. He would apparently, from what I've read, this man would go to Negro League games and go in the dugout. It's Ty Cobb, he can go wherever he wants. Sit on the bench and talk to the players. Just talk baseball with these guys. This racist fuck. Yeah, what a racist fuck. He's talking baseball with black players. And later in life, back home in Georgia there, he founded a hospital, and it was not a segregated hospital. Blacks were in it, which for that time would have been unusual. So Ty Cobb gets a bad rap a little bit in history. Now, early in his life, there were incidents. And I think he may have kind of mellowed with it, with age. But yeah, that's my Ty Cobb bit. Never did win a world championship, though. But great, probably the greatest pure hitter. And maybe the greatest pure hitting speed combination of all time. Because, he had the stolen base record until, I think Ricky broke hit. No, Lou Brock first broke it, and then Ricky, yeah. So we get into the late 1900s. 1908, yeah, the Merkel thing. Fred Merkel, oh God, this is so tragic. It's just sad. It just sucks for this guy, who was a very good Major League player, by the way. But this is year 1 of his Major League career. And he's not even a starter yet. He's just a guy. He's 18, I think. I think he was 18 at the time. You know, it was still a little bit more possible for teenagers to be in the major leagues because they didn't have the talent. You know, it's just they couldn't find all the talent. They didn't have any means for doing it. So you'd sign whoever you could. Which is why I say that even like in this era, you know, the National League and American League did not necessarily have all the best talent. Like the Pacific Coast League in California, for example. I mean, and the West Coast. You know, was that close to being a major league. It's just that those guys don't have any way to get east. I mean, they do, of course, the trains and stuff, but it's a pain in the butt. Not like you just fly to New York, you know, to sign with the Yankees. You know. Anyway, though, back to Merkle. All right, 1908. He's playing for the Giants, right? He's not a starter. Fred Tenney is the Giants' starting first baseman. And believe me, I know this story pretty well. I've read it in Glory of Their Times by Lawrence Ritter. It's mentioned by about 6 of the players in the book, in their interviews, because they were there. And they all have their own takes on it. So I've seen it from every angle, at least as far as, you know, in writing, you know. This poor kid. Now, the Giants and the Cubs in 1908 was the Cubs' last World Championship until 2016. I think it's karma, myself. But anyway, you'll hear what I'm about to say. They're playing about a week to go in the season. They're playing the Giants at the Polo Grounds, the Giants' home field there in New York. And these two teams are locked in a death struggle for the National League pennant, right? And they're both really good teams. I mean, they're the two dominant National League teams kind of at the time, with the Pirates also being in the conversation. But you know, this is one of them two is going to win the pennant this year. And the Giants, it's a tight game. I forgot to mention why Fred Merkle's in the game, right? Fred Teddy had he was injured that they had a headache or something, I think. That part, to be honest, don't remember. So Fred Merkle's starting at first base. This 18-year-old boy is starting at first base in this important game. And believe me, baseball games back then were, you know, at least locally, you know, they don't have any, there's not even radio yet. You know, they had telegraph, but, you know, whatever. But yeah, you know, the city of New York was quite excited about this game, especially Giants fans, which of those there were thousands. And they flooded this place, the Polo Grounds. They flooded it. And it's a tight game. It's a pitcher's duel, man. It's 1-1 going into the ninth. And now it's the bottom of the ninth. The Giants are batting. And I believe a guy named Moose McCormick gets a single, right? And then Merkle gets a single, a solid single to right center that moves McCormick to third. And then this guy, Al Bridwell, who has a chapter in Glory of the Times. And he tells his own account of it. And he's the one that gets the hit that caused all this crap. Not really, not a hit. Which we're going to get to. He hits what looks like a solid single to right field. McCormick should score. The Giants win. Except for one problem. There were 2 outs, by the way. I should mention that. It's important. At the Polo Grounds in those days, the clubhouse was in center field, which is just odd, but that's where it was. So in order to go to the club, you had to run through the outfield to get to the clubhouse. And Merkle, you know, because the Giant fans stormed the field thinking they'd won this game, and that's what they did back then, especially in New York. You know, typical New York behavior, right? It's kind of endearing, actually, but, you know, you don't see that much. Anyway, so Merkle, who's on first base, remember, and has to, you know, by rule of baseball, has to touch second base. Otherwise, well, I'll get to that. He takes off for the center field clubhouse. He gets halfway a second, he thinks the game's over. He just bolts for the center field clubhouse. You know, because the crowd's coming, right? And they didn't want to get mugged, you know. But he never touches second, is my point. And the Cubs infielders, who are very intelligent players, you know, Johnny Evers and Frank Chance and you know, Joe Tinker, but Johnny Evers, I think, was the guy that instigated this, sees this, and knows that if they just get the baseball and touch second base, it's a force out. And no, the run doesn't count. Because, you know, that's basically doesn't count. and he finds a baseball. Now, it's a confusing mass of humanity on this field at this point. There are reports that somebody in the Giants who had also seen this had kind of actually found the real baseball and hurled it into the right field stands to avoid this very thing. That's what they say. Some of these players in their accounts say that. But Johnny Evers finds a baseball. We don't know if it's the right one. He finds a baseball. Finds the umpire, this guy Hank O'Day, very famous umpire for the day. Goes over, touches second, and I think O'Day had even seen Merkle bolt to the clubhouse. And O'Day calls Merkle out. Imagine that now. Okay, just imagine the passion here from the people of it. There's no public address system. They had like bullhorns maybe. That was and then not even they had like those cone things. Whatever they call those. Yeah, bullhorn. I think primitive ones though. They didn't have any way of transmitting the thing, amplifying the sound or anything, right? So they have to explain to these Giant fans that no, game's not over. And now we got to clear the field because we got to play the 10th inning. Wow, that was fruitless. And believe me, the newspapers were merciless on this poor kid, Merkle. Who, by the way, I should mention, this had happened. The Cubs had the same thing happen to him a couple weeks earlier, something similar, where the Pirates guy got a supposed game when he hit, and the Pirate guy on first base went somewhere else because he thought the game was over, and the umpires didn't call it. They let the run stand. But the Cubs were ready for this, and boy, the newspapers said the bonehead called him a bonehead. Bonehead had moved my Merkle. This poor kid. And the upshot of this is, God, yeah, I don't care how long this takes. I'm just going to keep doing these until, yeah. The upshot of this is that there was still a week to go. And the Giants were playing like the Phillies, I think, in a 3-game series, and got swept by the worst team in the National League at the time. In fact, this guy, Stan Kowaleski, who was also in Glory of their Times, he talks about, he wasn't there at the Merkle game, but he talks about the next week. And he's called the Giant Killer. Stan Kowaleski, the Giant Killer. And he beat them, I think, twice that week. Pitchers would go on short rest back then for some reason. And it became, what the National League did, by the way, I didn't even mention this, is that they couldn't clear the field. They declared the game not a forfeit, but a tie. And if it needs to be made up for pennant race purposes, it will be. Well, sure enough. You get through the schedule, it ends up tied, they replay the thing, the Cubs win, and then go on to win the World Series. And as Keith Olbermann said, the Bastards hadn't won one since. Well, of course they have since then, but I thought that Cubs, that's where you get your bad karma from, Cubs, not the Billy Goat incident. That's where you get it from being dicks. I mean, the guy, honestly, they just should have let it go, But to their credit, they got... Okay, anyway, so that's the Merkle incident. One of the most famous things in baseball history at that point. But again, we're in the dead ball era, and, guys can hit 370, but, 400. Are you kidding me? Ty Cobb did it more than once. Yeah. Shoeless Joe Jackson did it more than once. Guys would hit 400, but they would hit with more power. Double power, maybe not, home run power. So then we get into 1999. And then another famous incident, 1912 World Series. Okay. The Fred Snodgrass incident. And what's hilarious about Fred Merkle's involved in this one too, but he's an ancillary character in it this time. He's not the guy that made the mistake. Not really. Kind of, in a way, but not really. Giants playing the Red Sox. Okay. I believe it's the bottom of the 9th inning of Game 7. They're leading. They're outs away from winning the World Championship, right? And Boston player, Tris Speaker, one of the great players in baseball history, is up with 2 outs. And he hits this foul pop-up off of first, between home and first there. And 3 Giants converge on this thing. Christy Mathewson's on the mound, the Hall of Famer. Fred Merkel's the first baseman, and the catcher also. And they let it drop. As accounts in glory of their times would state, Mathewson could have caught it in his hip pocket. But pitchers aren't expected to catch pop flies. They weren't then, they aren't now. And so the other two, he deferred to the other two, and Merkel didn't have much of a play on it, to be honest. It sounds like, but the catcher is trying to catch it, and he can't do it. Ball flops. Trisby gets new life. He gets a hit, and then the next guy hits this lazy fly ball to this guy Fred Snodgrass in the outfield. And if he catches the ball, the game's over, and the Red Sox win. Just a lazy fly ball. Fred Snodgrass drops it. The Red Sox, they tie it, and later win in extra innings, I think. And a lot of bad things are happening to these poor Giant guys, right? They won World Series in there too, so don't feel too bad for them. But yeah. Again, I'm not going much into the structure of baseball. It doesn't change much in this era. It's the same 8 cities and same 8 teams in each league. Nobody moves until the early 50s. So in this video, I ain't gonna get that far because I'm at 16 minutes. I've only gone like 5 years. Fine, we're just gonna do a whole series of these. It's fun that way. I want to get us at least to the end of the dead ball era in this one. We'll see if I can do that. So we're at 1912, right? And again, I'm going into more personalities and what happened on the field, which is kind of cool. And so you get to 1913 and 1914, and the great early 20th century Connie Mack teams are gonna. Well, 1914 was the last pennant they won for quite a while. It was they're the overwhelming favorites in the World Series, and they're playing this Boston Braves team, the Miracle Braves. Boston Braves, by the way, for those of you that are young and don't know, they used to play in Boston, and then later Milwaukee, now Atlanta, of course. Same team. Anyway, the Boston Braves playing at Braves Field, which is gone now, but yeah, in Boston now. They were the Miracle Braves because they had come from, I think at one point in like May, they were in last place. And they just got hot, and they kind of did it with mirrors in a way. They didn't have any particularly dominant players or Hall of Famers or anything on that team, I don't believe. They just came back, got hot as a team, and won the pennant. You see a little bit of that now with like the Rangers and stuff. Like that. And they won the pennant. They finished first. And they're overwhelming underdogs against this athletic powerhouse with Connie Mack's A's. But they swept the series. 4 games to nothing. Which reminds me of the Reds and A's in 1990, where the Reds were huge underdogs and they swept the series. But I don't think they were that great of underdogs. But anyway, the upshot of that is that the Athletics, after that series, and they had this continuous success basically since the start of the American League. Basically, Connie Mack just decided he's losing money a little bit. He's going to sell everybody who's any good. And that's what he does. He trades everybody away. And for 7 straight years, they're like the worst team in baseball. They won't be back for a while. They will be. They'll be back by the late 20s, but it's going to be a while. Anyway, then we move on. Huge moment in baseball history, but not one that was noted much at the time. 1914, Boston Red Sox. Well, the other Boston team. This young pitcher, the young kid, so young they called him Babe, makes his major league debut. George Herman Ruth. Babe Ruth. Huge. I mean, Babe Ruth would, is my opinion, he saved baseball. Not yet, of course. It takes a while, but what happens, which I'll probably get to that incident. The most controversial thing that's ever happened in baseball history outside of the steroid thing. Although, I would argue this was worse. But at least the steroid guys were just taking drugs to make themselves better. Whereas these people were gambling away their team. They're fixing the World Series. So you get into the late, mid to late teens, and the White Sox, the team we're about to talk about, become good. They got Shoeless Joe and You know, Eddie Collins and Eddie Seacott, just tons of good players. Buck Weaver, you know, good players. And they win a couple of World Series. And then you get to 1919, and they win the pennant again. They're going to play the Reds. The Reds are heavy underdogs in this thing. But the White Sox are kind of playing weird during the series. This was the last 5 out of 9 World Series ever. They kind of went back and forth there in the dead ball era. And this was going to be a 5 out of 9. And it's just weird that stuff that's happening on the field sometimes. And sports writers are noticing it. And veteran sports writers are noticing this. This doesn't... Boy, they actually are going... Are they laying down? Well, it turns out there's 8 guys that were. 8 men out, if you've ever seen that movie. You know, I mean, these guys are... They were, in fact, taking money from gamblers to throw the series to the Reds. Now, some of them were innocent victims in this. Like Shoeless Joe, I think, didn't do a thing to throw the series. He was one of the 8. But he was also illiterate. And I think he didn't understand what he was getting into. And so he said, I'll take some more money. You know, he didn't know what he was getting into. He took the money, though. Yeah. And eventually these 8 guys, of course, get banned from baseball for life, which sucks for Shoeless Joe because he would have been a Hall of Famer, an absolute Hall of Famer. There's still talk. People still want to get him in the Hall of Fame, and I'm not sure what I think about that. I wouldn't have a problem with him being in, but it's almost pointless. Well, I don't believe that it's pointless because they've been... No. If a guy should be in the Hall of Fame, he should be in the Hall of Fame. I don't believe in this pointless crap. He probably has living relatives somewhere who could, you know, be at the ceremony that probably remember great grandpa, you know what I mean? Because he lived to be quite old, and you know he kind of would play in like rogue minor leagues here and there, but you know, and under an assumed name usually. That's sad for all those guys, but they did it, man. Some of them were worse than others, like Happy Felsch. Yeah. They were the ringleaders in this, and those guys deserve to be banned for life, I think. I think they all gotta be. Fred McMullen, this poor kid, okay. This guy, he's a bench player for them. And almost never played. But he happened to be in a clubhouse when they were talking about this. And he said, look, I know about this now. I could tell people, you better let me in on this. And so they had to, and they did. Well, he got banned for life. For guilty knowledge, you know? Although he probably took money as well, but I don't know. So that's the Black Sox scandal. And this is where Babe Ruth comes in. Now, you know, the Babe, he's still playing for the Red Sox up until 1919. Mainly a pitcher, but he started playing in the outfield between starts because the Red Sox noticed that this kid can hit the ball a long ways. He was, well, for those of you youngins, he's the Shohei Ohtani of his time, in a way. Not really. That doesn't last long, because, you know, teams wise up about him and make him an outfielder, and he doesn't pitch anymore. And in 1919, I believe, he had 29 home runs, which was the record. And then in 1920, the Red Sox sell him to the Yankees, because Harry Frazee, their owner, was losing money on this play that he was putting called No No Nanette. And you ask any Red Sox fan who's a Red Sox historian type guy about No No Nanette, you'll hear curse words. Because they had to sell Babe Ruth because of that fucking shit. To the Yankees. And the Yankees, the timing here is so exquisite. The Red Sox don't win another World Series until 2004. The Yankees, who had at that time not won one, or been in one even, they were still they were the Yankees by now, win like 25 in that stretch. It's the curse of the Bambino. That's what that is. He sells him to the Yankees. He goes to New York, the Babe, and becomes this absolute mega celebrity. Maybe the most famous man in America, aside from whoever the president of the United States might happen to be at the time. In fact, sometimes, as he once commented with Herbert Hoover, You'd make more money than Herbert Hoover. Well, I had a better year than he did. Perfect. And he was larger than life, man. His appetites were immense. You know, there's stories like the train would stop on the way somewhere, the team, you know, and he would stop and eat like 8 hot dogs. Could drink like a fish. Loved to drink his beer. Could smoke cigars like a. It killed him eventually, sadly. Which is too bad. I wish he'd lived to be 85 years old or something. Been an elder statesman at baseball games. It would have been kind of cool to see in the 60s, you know, and 70s. But it is what it is. But man, when he was alive and playing, man, 714 home runs, 60 home runs in 1927. Yankee Stadium was built basically because of him. They call it the house that Ruth built, and that's why. And he saved baseball, is my important point. Because he became huge, but at the same time, the Black Sox scandal was festering. And it's possible organized baseball could have teetered, but Babe Ruth saved the game. And teams realized, wait, we got to make the ball a little less dead here. And I don't know what much was done with the baseball per se, but guys started swinging with uppercut swings. That was the main thing. It was the hitting approach changed. And the dead ball era just ended in 1920. And now home runs were much more common. And it was more aesthetically pleasing, I guess, because now I don't like to see the steroid era level of home runs, but you know, a lot more home runs hit after that. And then you get these great Yankee teams in the 20s, Lou Gehrig and Bob Musial, and yeah. They're underrated pitching. They're kind of like the Astros era in a way. Yeah, the underrated pitching, you know. Nobody ever talks about the Yankee pitching, but it was great. And, you know, you got in the National League, the Giants. The Giants actually win like 2. They play the first 3 Yankee World Series they played in were against their crosstown rivals. Okay. They lost the first 2, and Babe Ruth was noticeably absent as far as contributing. The third year the Yankees finally break through, and the rest is history. Again, we're up to, 27, 28 World Championships by then now, which is obviously far and away more than any other team. I mean, the story of baseball from here on in is basically written. It's basically what happens to the Yankees is almost always a central thing in it. They're a prominent part of it from now on. You know, they have their down moments here and there, but very rare. I'm at 27 minutes. And I've gotten us to the 20s. That's pretty good. I got a few more minutes. I'm going to keep going. Oh, man. I don't have time enough to watch this before I have to go to my favorite place on earth. Shangri-La. Yes. The Hotel McDonald's. Yes. Anyway. So, where should I end this? Babe Ruth in 1927, he hit 60 home runs. Which, it's amazing. He broke his own record, which has been 59. And that record stood until Roger Maris. And wasn't topped. The second time that record was topped wasn't until 1998. I mean, Roger Maris, then in 61, and then, Sosa McGuire in 98. That was the next time. And I think that's a convenient place to stop, I guess. I don't know. So, 1927 was kind of into the late 20s. So we extended our baseball history 23 years about. Okay. And I'm not going deep into detail on things, but I added more, this is more of an on the field game thing. So that's kind of cool. It'd be fun to listen. Anyway, though, yep. Take me out.